Thank you for joining us. We are here for a lovely conversation on designing technology stack. It's going to be difficult because it's just after lunch. But as they say, content should be the king. We have stars here. But what we're going to discuss today, I hope it is enriching. It should be enabling. And I hope that it also makes you reflect back on how we take decisions back in our own organizations. What we're looking at is how, as an L&D professional in today's times, where each year a new technology trend comes in, which is hyped as the next big thing in the learning realm, how do I take a decision whether to invest on it or not? How do I clear my decision-making process from the junk to the really relevant ones? Biocon, as an organization, we are a pharma organization, and particularly we are a biopharma organization. We get audited every week. In fact, these days, we are getting audited every week by every country in the world because we want to sell the products in those countries. Now, in that condition, every piece of my organizational operation is audited. I'm not saying only the business, manufacturing, and operations, but even the technology that I use to train my people needs to be audited. I have to take a very conscious decision on whether I bring in the kind of technology that I bring in. How sustainable is it going to be? How scalable is this? What about the traceability of records? What about the duplication, data integrity, and a whole lot of activities and a whole lot of compliances that I have to think on before I take a decision on this technology needs to be brought into aid learning. I'm only talking from pharma perspective, but that's a question that lies in all of our minds. So today, the way I'm going to have this conversation with all our panelists here is to ask some relevant questions, ask these individuals to give out their opinions, and charter it down to the point where we create a kind of a checklist for ourselves on what are the good things to do when you're evaluating a technology platform, a technology stack for yourself. What are the precursors to the technology decision-making that you do, and how do you approach on your conviction on whether this technology needs to be brought in your organization, or do you need to wait for it? And at the end, about 7-8 minutes, I'll leave it to the audience to ask questions to our panelists, and that's how we will take this conversation. So, as I said the context, I'm going to ask Azfar, who's leading a conglomerate, the OD and the learning space for a conglomerate where it's not just one kind of business, but there are varied businesses, different kinds of individuals, different kinds of employee life cycle. How do you bring in the choice of technology to leveraging the technology to aid learning? Also, we want to understand how do you create that choice between should I keep the platform standard for every line of business, or should I leave it customized for a specific line of business? So what's that balance that you create? Azfar.
It works. So good afternoon. So RPG, as you know, at least our part of RPG has 7 companies, and they are quite varied, from plantation companies like Harrison's Malayalam to, on one end, to IT services company like Zensar. That you've got a pharmaceutical company, you've got an automotive component company, you've got infrastructure as well. So when we were, the part of the platform that's consistent is really the learning management system platform. So that was a choice made. And I think that's not too much of an issue because most of the larger players in that area have catered to industries across the spectrum. So that wasn't too much of an issue. I think when we were choosing between the LMS platforms, it was really the functionalities that determined which one we'd go for. All the stacks above that, so whether it's content, definitely the content stack is, again, we've got one part of the content stack that is standard across the group, but then there are other parts of the content stack which are unique to each company, especially on the functional, technical learning side. Usually the behavioral leadership learning part is consistent across the group. And then, of course, we have a analytics layer on top of that, which again is consistent across the group, because most of these analytical tools that you have, are drawing data from the LMS. So we thought it would be useful to have a consistent approach there. And then there's also the question of interest and affordability on the part of each company. So companies such as Zensar, which are in IT services, where learning is a very integral part of the employee value proposition that you make, have more sophisticated requirements than, say, for example, a plantation company where learning and development is not a unique part of the employee value proposition.
Great. So as we understand is that one platform that is standard, and of course behavioral content is usually standard because as you go up at the leadership level, you're rather fungible from different roles to different businesses, and that should be made because that enriches your exposure and your experience. But whereas at the bottom and the middle, since the focus is a lot more on technical, it's let customized to the specific businesses. Now, when we talk about behaviors and behavioral learning, I'd like to ask Deepa. So in organizations today, we have different kinds of employee groups. We have different kinds of employee needs. We have different requirements of businesses. How should L&D function change its way of operations to suit the learner requirements, looking at the learner needs, the retention of learning, and also the adoption pattern to technology? Different people have different levels of adoption to technology. So how do we create that balance, and how does L&D function look at this aspect before they take a decision on what platform, what to do? Deepa.
Thanks. So the way I'd like to approach this is, I think we've all heard about trying to do a business case for it, but the need is really there, and it's time for L&D folks to really transform themselves. Given that technology is available and data can be collected and can be analyzed, it's very important that we really make the shift now to really understand what is the need of the end user. It really isn't learning. It really is about progression, career progression. And how are they going to get there? If they get there, the company also benefits. So the L&D organization has to, sort of bring those two together and, make that a one-aided goal of how do we make this person progress and how do we benefit the company? And the technology and data exists. So I'll give you guys some example of how it's happening in different organizations that I'm in touch with, and all of this technology exists right now. So for example, in a sales case, and Sudeep, you can relate to this, for sales in a pharma environment, what are you going to capture? You're going to capture, does the person really understand the product? It's a pretty complex sale, selling a pharma product. So where is the level of the person in terms of his understanding of the product? And if it's at different levels for different people, then you need to develop content which matches their levels. It's as simple as that. And you gather that through assessments or what have you. And then you also need to gather how are they performing on the ground? How are they actually performing on the ground? And you do that through doing some stuff on the platform, which allows you to track their skill levels of negotiation, closing deals, and so on. And also get some input, real-time input from their managers on how did they perform on a particular meeting. Do a survey, a feedback, and gives you real-time analysis of how the person has performed. And most importantly, what impact did that salesperson have on the doctor that he's trying to sell to? Was he able to engage that doctor? Get that feedback, put it into your training system, and then do your learning adaptive path accordingly. And again, all of this is very doable. It might sound like rocket science, but you have to get these inputs, the performance on the ground. And this is just, a starting point. I would love if L&D can really push the envelope in terms of really working as an operations department of a company and, in hand with the business units, For example, things like recruiting, talent management, right? You're trying to hire people for blockchain and cybersecurity. Those people don't exist today. Those courses are not taught in universities, and you can't go get fresh people who understand that. So what you do is you offer this training course on blockchain on the platform, have it at a storefront or whatever. I know of a bank who's trying to do this, and then have the person take that course and do an assessment. Has that person been able to grasp that particular technology? How conversant is he with it? Does he have the aptitude for it? It's pretty simple for you to figure it out, and then you hire the person or you don't hire the person. So think about other ways you can use your training as an enabler for solving a business need. And I'd just like to end with one example, one more, which I thought is great, where a customer is actually trying to help where an organization is trying to help their customer actually, for example, this insurance company, what they're trying to do is train their insurees on emotional driving. Okay, so if you train your if these people take that training course, the insurance premium goes down. And that's just a result. If your insurance premium goes down, obviously the person is very, the insurance liabilities go down, the company prospers, as well as the customer prospers, right? And it's an incentive for them to take that course. So think of creative ways how you're really going to get the whole ecosystem involved in learning and solve a business problem. I think that's my short answer.
But Deepa, that's very nice. But we talked about the functional skills that is being pushed. Again, the organization chooses that I need to move into blockchain and Bitcoin and whatnot. And therefore, I need my people to be trained on it. And I push the content across and see who learns, who picks up, how do they pick up. What about the behavioral skill requirement? My behavioral skill requirement, I need to focus on interpersonal skills or improve my negotiation skills, whereas somebody else wants to become a better public speaker. What about the learner needs and technology that can help here? Or should I, for behavioral, is there something where we can take a choice? This is where technology works best. This is where I think leave it to experts who can handle you better.
I think here I would say it's the 20-80. It's not the 80-20, whereas 20% you can do on the platform, but 80% is experiential in the classroom. I wouldn't compensate for that at this point in time.
And that's the case for blended learning,
Yes.
which is very important in today's time.
Absolutely.
I just want to do a quick raise of hands with everybody. Is there anybody in the room today, in his or her organization, does not use an LMS? We have a minority, but we do have. How many people, okay, thank you. How many people have LMS, but primarily 80% of LMS usage is for record management? Now that's where the numbers are going up. How many of us have moved to new age technologies, which are like AI and machine learning for L&D activities? Few. So there are all kinds of organizations in this ecospace itself. And that's where I would like to ask Anand. Anand, there are lots of kind of technologies that are available. The new age technologies which are there, the machine learning, AI, the VRs and the ARs, and at the same time, you also have blended learnings and LMS and upgraded LMS and LMS 2.0, which is also there. What do you see are the trends that are emerging from the organizations? How are the organizations looking at technology adoption in there? How quick they are? And before an organization chooses a technology platform to aid its learning, how should they assess their ability to adopt to a technology? If you can shed a few lights on this, Anand.
Hello. By the way, my opinion is free, and you know what it means when it's a free opinion, right? Yeah. All right, with that said, so I will turn that question upside down, actually. What I'd like to actually start with is, how should we think about, training first of all? And technology is only an enabler. It's not the end-all, be-all at the end of the day, right? So let's start there first. Let's, dispel the notion that technology is that magic pill. It's not. And I come from a perspective, two-part perspective. One is we are the co-pilot L&D for a lot of companies. I also get a chance to talk to a lot of L&D leaders worldwide to figure out what their practices are. So coming from that angle, I think the first thing I would actually tell folks here is figure out what your North Star metrics are. What are you trying to accomplish with your training program? And it might be multifaceted depending on the programs you're running, but you need to have 1 to 3 North Star metrics that really define your success metrics. And it cannot be 7, 10, 20. Be very clear. There are 1 to 3 North Star metrics. Now, once you have those metrics, it becomes actually a question of what is your learning and training model that you want to have that achieve these North Star metrics. And the funny thing is it's actually in fashion now to say pull-based is the king and micro-learning is the king. The truth is it's not that black and white, right? The truth is if you want something in a very short time and you want to get it done with a very specific outcome, push works very successfully, right? So let's dispel that myth as well, that pull is successful, way better than push, and micro-learning is the cool thing. You need macro-learning as well. If you're doing an onboarding for a fresh hire, macro-learning is the way to go. You can't do it with micro-learning. It's a little harder. Let's put it that way. It can be done with micro-learning, but it's harder. So you basically have a choice now of tool sets, micro-learning versus macro-learning, push versus pull. You have, so many different other models you have to figure out. If I want to achieve this North Star metric, what is my training model that achieves that North Star metric? And that'll be different for every one of you guys. Now, once you have that figured out, then that's where the technology really comes in. So this is your framework, right? You first have to build that framework. Now let's talk about technologies in the context of that framework first, right? And you ask sustainability and scalability. So that framework really is important for sustainability and scalability. Let's start with something that's at the very highest level, where you talked about LMS 2.0. One trend we see pretty regularly now in conversations with customers, actually more so in the last 6 months than over the last 2 to 3 years, is the concept of learning experience platforms, LXPs. Now, is it a short term? People are dabbling with it. Is it actually at scale? Tough to say at this point in time, but I can tell you the trend is real. And if people are here who are managing LXPs, then you probably are feeling good about my statement here. But they actually solve a very specific problem. A lot of L&Ds today have plethora of libraries, and they don't know how to maximize the engagement and outcome out of those. What LXPs really do is simplify the process, make it learner-driven, not L&D-driven. So if it's a pull model, LXPs work exceptionally well, right? So that's one technology clearly that is seeming to gather steam at this point of time. Now we get into sort of the enablers to success, right? And I start with machine learning and AI, which you brought up. To me, AI and machine learning is no more a question of should you consider it. Whether you're doing pull or push or micro-learning or macro-learning, machine learning is here to stay. It's a question of when you're going to adopt it. And some use cases that today we use and we see customers using it to some extent, it's very early days, but it's being used, is customization and personalization of programs, right? When you start, if you know your learner profile, if you're able to have some specific profiling information that then lets you cohort these learners and then customize the learning paths for them, this is where machine learning and algorithms really play a pretty important role, especially at scale, right? So when I think of technologies that seem to already have become mainstream or being adopted across all different use cases, machine learning is one of those that clearly comes out. Now, I want to echo one thing you said, which is using of data. If you're not using data, this is not possible, right? So you have to have rich data, the right kind of data, and the right kind of North Star metrics to really drive machine learning to go in that direction. So that's one part. Now I'll talk about a little bit of hype just to maybe contradict that. AR and VR, right? Again, it's very fashionable to say I do AR, I do VR, but I think we should be very clear that AR, VR has a very specific niche. It's exceptional at that niche, but it's actually ROI is very negative in other niches, right? So if you think of AR, VR for someone who is trying to learn how to fix a machine, beautiful, right? But if you're thinking of teaching DevOps to somebody with AR, VR, and you just think it's very cool, think of the cost to the learner, think of the entry point that you have to now set up for the learner to actually learn this course. Yes, it's more engaging, but is the ROI positive? Questionable, right? So think of AR, VR more as is my program, the right kind of program where AR, VR can play a real role, and is the cost of getting into it actually worth for me? So that's one of those where I think I'm a little more 50-50. Now let's get to the more basic hygiene type of technologies, right? Social, mobile, analytics and cloud. I think everybody's heard of SMAC, pretty common term. One trend that I see quite commonly, and social platforms have been around forever, but usage of social platforms, community, trying to create peer-to-peer learning, peer-to-peer grading systems, that's emerging a lot more in the last, I would say 6 to 12 months in the conversations I've been having with a lot of customers. We have built a pretty strong platform based on that feedback of customers, right? So that's tending to be quite common now, communities that self-sustain and drive learning. Analytics, I think you've spoken quite a bit about it, so I'm not going to go too deep there. But if you're not doing analytics and you're not measuring pre-class, in-class, post-class analytics of the class and the student success, There's a missing piece there. Mobile. For pull-based learning and bite-sized learning, very effective. A great partner companion for macro learning as well, so very effective there. And finally, cloud. If today's platforms are all on the cloud, so this is a hygiene statement. The heavy-duty bolted-on systems are gone. So LMS 2.0 is truly the watchword. LXPs are the watchword. SaaS platforms are definitely the hygiene level there. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense in the 5 minutes I have. There's a lot more to talk here, but hopefully I'll stop there.
There are different technologies. I mean, there's a lot of technologies for us to gather, but what you talked about in scalability and sustainability of technologies, you talked about the learning models that we need to look at. Do you think we need to change the learning models that exist with L&D professionals today? We talked about, we've all grown up with Bloom's taxonomy and the VAC and adult learning theories. In today's world with mobile, micro-learning and whole whatnot, do we need to relook at the learning models?
Yeah, so I'm going to say some slightly troubling statements, if you may, but I think I'm not here to be safe, so I'm just going to say what I have to say, right?
Yeah, sure.
See, fundamentally, I come from a software background, and I think software has solved a lot of problems at scale already. And I think when I moved into EdTech, about 3 or 4 years back, one thing I clearly saw was EdTech was in the evolution of software 15 years back. And two very easy things that come to mind immediately is the concept of Agile and DevOps. If you go to any random engineer and you ask them, do you understand Agile and DevOps? They'll just know it. They know they're doing it. They're practicing it. So one thing we do internally, and we actually envisage this quite a bit to our customers, is you don't build content as a big, giant, humongous thing that is monolithic. You build it in modular pieces. You build it in sprints. You get feedback as you build it from customers, hopefully, and then you go on and build a great world-class program, right? That's one piece. So Agile is super important. The second is actually, gone are the days where you're having somebody go through all the content, review it for language, Bloom's taxonomy, is it all right? Everything's automated these days. When we check in code, when we create a content, there's a script that runs through the entire content, finds grammatical issues, all the hygiene issues straight away. So I think one part is just how we operate, and I think it's time to adopt software practices in the L&D space, which is Agile and DevOps. The second part that has become quite important, again, coming from the software space, is design thinking. I will tell you very candidly, instructional design in its traditional format is dying. It doesn't exist anymore in my view. I think design thinking is a new watchword, and curriculum design is actually more important. A traditional design thinker is thinking of taxonomy, which is great, that's hygiene again. But you need to actually, now as an instructional designer, go out and find out if you have a department within your company that has a need, understand the need really well, figure out what they want, get that North Star metric, and then design the curriculum to that. Traditional instructional design doesn't do that, and I think that's a huge change that needs to happen.
That's a good point. That's a good point on that. And all of you have talked about analytics, and I want to specifically spend some time on big data, data analytics in L&D space. How much are we using? What are your stories around how organizations have successfully acted upon it? As for you've been talking, we were talking outside, and you said that the organization RPG is actually trying to put together a vertical on insights and analytics. So how do you see the trends happening? What about descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive analytics? Have we reached there at all, or are we still stuck with dashboards and thinking that these are analytics? I'll ask each one of you to spend some time on this, please.
So before I start on that, I'd just like to kind of respond to some of the stuff that Anand here said. So I've been in HR now for 25 years, and in learning and development, roughly around this, I've experienced learning and development in some form or the other, roughly for that time. And I must confess that this design thinking bit, so wherever you go now, people talk about design thinking. And to me, it's a nice, catchphrase, but people were doing design thinking even before design thinking came into being. And as someone who was designing programs in 94, 95, we were going out and understanding what is the need of the...
We used to call it out-of-box thinking back in those days.
So, yeah, some thinking, basically. So, but anyway, so my thing is that actually in learning and development, if you see over the last 25 years, what's really changed is now you have technology that helps you learn faster, because you don't necessarily have to go into a classroom during work hours only to go through a learning experience. you now have various kinds of technologies that provide you that learning experience elsewhere. I think what's really exciting about whether it's machine learning or artificial intelligence going forward is, see, right now, a lot of people use self-paced learning for more the knowledge part, because you still don't get the, practice, the feedback through self-paced learning. But I think through artificial intelligence and machine learning, I think that part can get self-paced, and I think that part is really exciting going forward. Coming back to the analytics question, at Zensar, which is the IT services company in RPG, we have a HR app that, kind of, in a way, enables the employee experience from the onboarding all the way to separation. And there's a lot of data that comes in through the app that gets captured, which then gets analyzed. And then, sometimes you do end up finding that across the entire employee life experience, there are, some factors that seem to be common, and therefore, there's a larger issue that needs to be addressed. And at times, it's very localized factors that get thrown up. But the entire sentiment analysis over and above the more quantitative numerical analytics that get done is being done. At RPG, we've just started a inciting function within the HR digital team. And the objective of the inciting function is to use the analytics and combine it with other forms of inciting, which may be more qualitative in nature, to kind of understand the issues behind questions that we are interested in. So I think that's
Deepa,
where we're going.
What do you think about the data analytics in L&D being used today?
पहले data होगा तो फिर तो analytics होंगे ना.
That's a very good question.
So, I go back to the basics.
So are we not, because a lot of us, LMS everywhere, barring about 3 or 4 people here in this room, everybody has LMS. So we are recording data.
Yeah, but we're not recording the right data, and we haven't been recording it in the right systematic format that we can make sense of it. And there's all this stuff lying all over the place. The employee information doesn't flow into the LMS information. The LMS information doesn't flow into the attrition, the HR platforms, and so on. So there's no circular loop that's being formed. So what analysis are you going to make of that stuff, right? So what prediction are you going to take? So everything, for me right now, at least in India, is stuck at descriptive analytics. There is an opportunity to move to predictive, and people have started collecting the data, and it does happen in pockets where attrition is being...
No, but in L&D?
L&D, I see it more happening in the West.
What do you see happening?
So, for example, a company that's actually has 450,000 people on this platform, the TimeToKnow platform, and they're able to actually predict the attrition rate of people falling off based on the engagement level of the person on the system.
So learning engagement level is helping us predict the retention of your employee.
Person on the platform.
Person on the platform.
Not attrition from the
some
company.
Data.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anand?
I unfortunately or fortunately agree completely with what Deepa said. I think in the conversations I've had with a lot of customers, and if we peel the onion again further, right, I think first of all is, do you have a data layer that you can actually create the right kind of data architecture to pull from? That's question number one. I think that level of maturity I do see in most organizations. I think the challenge really is from that, typically organizations are able to take the first level insights, which is, who are my good learners, who are my not so engaged learners, which to me is a superficial piece, right? Where we have not gotten to, and I have not seen this example personally, so it's great to see there's at least one example you've seen, is where we start looking at, profiles of students and specific persona, attributes, and how that then drives specific outcomes, and you predict those outcomes. And you're able to actually intervene based on those profiles and those algorithms to actually, drive some kind of outcome. Personally, I'm yet to see that, so it's good to see that there are a few examples there, but I think that's the place where I think the opportunity lies.
So that's a cue for all of us that we now need to start looking at analytics data and real data, not just any data. Azfar, is there a checklist that we should create? I'm going to come to the actual question. Is there a checklist that is there or that we can refer to when we evaluate a technology that needs to be brought into my organization? Is there a precursor that I should look at?
So I think Anand made a good point, which is that going back to first principles, I think it's very important that you understand what those North Star metrics you're looking for. In the sense that so if you want to evaluate any technology, in what context are you evaluating it? So for example, in learning and development, it's really about, hey, will it help drive the learning agenda? Will it help encourage people to take on or enroll register for learning programs? Because the experience is really good. So experience is one definite criteria. The other is, does it do a good job of, collecting quantitative data that you can then use for other analysis? So that's another criteria. A third criteria is, will this technology, and now I'm talking more of the LMS side, but will this talk to other parts of the HR systems? So that's a third criteria. A fourth criteria is, will this, a lot of times you're migrating from one system to another. So will this be able to capture all the data that already exists in my current systems? Or if I've got offline data, will it be able to take that data in so that I can have a continuous history of our learners? Fifth, of course, is, financially, does it make sense? A lot of times I've had people come and pitch technologies to me, which look great, but the cost-benefit analysis doesn't work out. Sixth is, really about, are there any other functionalities, that I may have not come across in my own experience that this technology provides? That's something which kind of gives you an aha moment. So if it does, that's great, right? So that's really, in a way, as far as the LMS or LMS kind of a platform evaluation is concerned. There's a lot of other technology that comes in. For example, somebody might come and say, hey, I've got this great technology which allows you to follow up with learners who've gone to programs so that there's engagement with learners over a period of time after the program gets over. Now, to me, that's a great idea. Again, it boils down to whether the cost-benefit analysis works out. Somebody might come and say, I've got this great virtual learning platform that you can use. Again, it depends on the cost-benefit analysis, whether it works out. So a lot of it is cost-benefit analysis for the non-platform, LMS platform bit. The LMS platform, I think I've already shared. So.
Okay, since we are running short of time now, and I'll do a quick rapid fire with all of you as such. What's the most hyped technology in today's time, Deepa?
I think it's AI, because people don't really need to use it right now. There are a lot of other technologies there that can be used to reach the same place.
Okay.
And you need to do a lot of data
Anand.
collection before making use of it.
Different one. I think AR, VR right now.
Okay. Azfar?
I think it's micro-learning. I think the learning is really micro.
Okay. Okay, and what do you think is the most outdated technology and we must move on quickly from it?
Go ahead.
I'm the wrong person to start on this.
Okay.
I can probably jump in. LMS 1.0. I mean, the old school LMS, which is just a content
Just content,
delivery.
CBT-based,
Doesn't
CBTs. Okay, okay. And one personal question, how do you like to learn? Do you like to learn in a classroom with experts, or would you like to do it self-paced with chatbots? Yeah, personal question to all three of you.
Combination of the two.
Okay, you chose an easy one.
Classroom with experts.
Combination, 80% self-driven, 20% classroom.
Okay, I'll leave it to the audience now.
That cannot be a good thing.
Okay, we can have only one question, please.
Anand, the question that I have for you is that over the years, we've seen a lot of fancy applications, technologies, et cetera, coming into play. And there is that flirting that happens with the organizations, especially when they try to experiment with all of that. So how much have these new platforms succeeded in displacing traditional form of learning? And how do you know that the kind of cool technologies and the platforms that we have is really delivering the impact that it touts?
I think it's an amazing question. In fact, I'll go to the extent of saying, training started with classroom, physical classroom. And even today, if you look at the highest engagement and highest outcome you can get, if you can afford it and have the ability to do it, physical classrooms are unbeatable, actually, right? So I want to answer that question slightly differently, which is, I think over time, what's happened is not that these have been replaced, but what has happened is that the learning models have become more segmented. And we have a better nuanced understanding of learner models and learning models. And so wherever the traditional technologies have still continued working, they still apply. An example might be, let's take an example of cybersecurity, for example. While you could do completely self-learning, it's a pretty complex topic. You probably want to be in a classroom with an expert, with a sandbox, with something that you can play with and touch and feel it. And all the newfangled micro-learning approaches will fail, right? So I think my 2 cents to that from what I have seen is, I think it's less about replacement, and it's more, we have become much more nuanced in how we cater to learners, and technology is starting to apply to these more nuanced segments.
Thank you. I think that to end it, I think that would be the best way to say it. Not replacement, but supplemented all kinds of learning. Thank you, my co-panelists. I think it was a very invigorating session. And thank you, audience.